Imagine that instead of being tortured by flames and demons, you are consumed by the anguish of eternal coexistence with other people, unable to escape even their gaze. Does this sound absurd? And yet, Jean-Paul Sartre presents us with exactly this vision in his play No Exit. The famous phrase, "Hell is other people," sparks an unsettling reflection. How can we deal with our freedom in a world where others constantly define us? Sartre shows us that when we live in a space where there is no privacy, we are forced to confront our greatest fears and weaknesses, revealed by the constant presence of others. In this video, we will explore how this existentialist philosophy unfolds and how it engages with other schools of thought. Get ready to understand Sartre's view on freedom, shame, and the eternal struggle against the gaze of others. Jean-Paul Sartre wrote No Exit in 1944, a time of great historical tension with France occupied by the Nazis. The author, already developing his existentialist philosophy, saw this context as a reflection of a central issue in the human condition: how we are defined by the relationships we maintain with others. Sartre believed that human beings are, by their nature, free, but this freedom is constantly threatened by society and human interactions. The play takes place in a hell that is not the traditional Christian hell, with flames and physical tortures, but a psychological prison where three people, Garcin, Inès, and Estelle, are forced to live together in a room with no escape. Throughout the work, these characters face their flaws and revelations, continually exposed by the gaze of others. Sartre uses this scenario to explore his idea of being for others, a central concept in his philosophy, where he argues that the human being is not an isolated entity, but is defined in relation to the other. The gaze of the other is not just an observation. It is a way of reducing, defining, and even imprisoning us. The play becomes an existential experiment where the characters, interacting with each other, are constantly forced to face their own imperfections with no possibility of escape. It is this external gaze that Sartre sees as the true source of suffering, the hell that does not come from within, but from human relationships. The idea of being for others goes far beyond mere coexistence. For Sartre, the other is not just a person we interact with, but also a mirror that reflects us, often distorting our identity. This concept aligns perfectly with what Sartre develops in Being and Nothingness, where he asserts that human consciousness is not something closed, but is always open to the other. The gaze of the other transforms us, objectifies us. In other words, the other does not simply see who we are, but in a way creates us, defines us, by imposing an identity upon us that we do not always choose. In No Exit, the characters are condemned to live with the knowledge that their flaws are evident to others. Garcin, a man who considered himself a hero, is forced to face the shame of his cowardice, something he cannot change. Inès, who is sadistic and cruel, finds herself unable to escape her role as a villain. Estelle, in turn, is consumed by vanity and the need for approval, but cannot cope with the fact that her superficiality is constantly exposed. All of them, by seeing themselves through the gaze of the other, become prisoners of their own flaws. There is no redemption, no escape, and the suffering lies precisely in the fact that their flaws are eternally exposed without any possibility of pretense or disguise. Sartre's concept of being for others resonates with other philosophical currents, but in a contradictory way. If we think, for example, of Friedrich Nietzsche, we find a philosophy that also addresses the struggle against limitations imposed by society and traditional morality. Nietzsche proposes that we should be authentic, seeking personal fulfillment without submitting to the oppressive gaze of others. But he focuses more on the affirmation of one's will and power, not on the impossibility of escaping social objectification. On the other hand, Emmanuel Levinas presents an ethical approach where the other is not a threat, but an opening for moral responsibility. For Levinas, the other calls us to ethical action, to an altruistic and welcoming response, while Sartre sees the other as a force that limits our freedom. These contrasts show how the relationship with the other can be viewed from different philosophical perspectives, some more integrative and others more alienating. Furthermore, Sartre's phrase is a direct critique of the traditional Christian view of hell, where physical punishment is the main form of suffering. Instead, Sartre proposes an existential hell, where suffering arises from the constant exposure of our identity to the gaze of the other. In this sense, Sartre's work can also be seen as a critique of traditional morality and the way society tries to define and control individuals, often reducing them to labels and stereotypes. At the conclusion of No Exit, Jean-Paul Sartre leaves us with no solace or easy solutions. The characters find no redemption. They remain trapped under the relentless gaze of the others. This philosophical condemnation mirrors Sartre's existentialist vision. We are radically free, yet that freedom is inevitably shaped by our relationships with others. Hell, in this sense, is not a physical place, but a state of constant objectification. However, Sartre challenges us not to view this as a final verdict, but as an invitation to take responsibility for our choices and strive for authenticity, even under the watchful eyes of others. This message, while powerful, can feel paralyzing. How then do we live in a world where the judgment of others is inescapable? Can we free ourselves from the anxiety brought on by external opinions? Here, complementary philosophies like Stoicism offer practical strategies and insights to navigate this existential tension. Stoicism, for instance, emphasizes the distinction between what is within our control and what lies beyond it. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic thinkers, famously said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Applied to Sartre's context, this means that while we cannot prevent others from judging us, we can choose how we respond to those judgments. The gaze of others need not imprison us if we accept that their perceptions are beyond our control. Instead, we can focus on what we can govern: our choices, our actions, and how we live our lives. Furthermore, Stoicism champions the idea of inner sufficiency. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, asserts that true freedom lies in living according to one's principles, irrespective of external opinions. He writes, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." This aligns with Sartre's call for authenticity. Rather than letting others define us, we must fully embrace our existence and act in harmony with our values. Another practical tool for dealing with social objectification is mindfulness. By grounding ourselves in the present moment, mindfulness helps us reduce the influence of anxious thoughts about others' judgments. It teaches us to observe our feelings and reactions without being overwhelmed by them, granting us greater freedom from external pressures. Returning to Sartre's framework, the goal is not to isolate ourselves from others or deny their significance, but to learn to coexist with their gaze in a mature way. Sartre reminds us that we are beings of relationship. The other is both a threat and an opportunity. In other words, while the other can imprison us, they also challenge us to confront parts of ourselves we might otherwise ignore. The key is finding balance, acknowledging the inevitable presence of the other without allowing it to completely define us. Ultimately, Sartre offers a striking reflection. Hell is not other people because of what they do, but because of what we allow them to do in our minds. Accepting this freedom and the weight that comes with it is the first step toward overcoming existential anxiety. Sartre doesn't hand us easy answers, but leaves us with a provocation. If we are condemned to freedom, why not use it to live more authentically, challenging the gaze of others while accepting it as an inescapable part of our human condition? Stoic philosophy, mindfulness practices, and even the ideas of thinkers like Friedrich Nietzsche offer complementary paths forward. Nietzsche's encouragement to become who you are echoes Sartre's existentialist call and reminds us that, despite the limitations imposed by others, we always retain the choice to assert ourselves as individuals. And so, we end with a question posed by Sartre and many other philosophers. What are you doing today to live authentically, free from the hell of others' opinions? Thanks for watching. Put in the comments what you would like to see in the next videos.